I found out my wife was cheating on me on a Thursday night in March, and the strangest part wasn't the discovery itself. It was how calm I felt afterward. Victoria had left for her therapy session around 4:30, same as every Thursday for the past 8 months. She'd kissed my cheek at the door, told me not to wait up if she was late, and reminded me that her anxiety had been really flaring up lately. I'd nodded, told her I loved her, and watched her pull out of the driveway in her white Lexus. By 9:47 that evening, I was sitting in our living room with her iPad in my hands, and my entire understanding of the past 7 years was collapsing like a condemned building. It started innocently enough. She'd mentioned a podcast a few weeks back, something about mindfulness and emotional regulation, and I'd been meaning to listen to it during my morning workouts. The iPad was charging on the kitchen counter where she'd left it. I knew her passcode. We'd never had secrets. That thought would become darkly funny to me later. I scrolled through her apps looking for a podcast player, and that's when I noticed a folder labeled Session Notes. My first assumption was exactly what you'd expect. Victoria had mentioned once that she sometimes recorded her therapy sessions to review later, something about processing insights more effectively. Dr. Green had apparently encouraged it. So I tapped the folder. Dozens of audio files, each one dated. The most recent was from February 28th, about 2 weeks prior. I pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, relaxed and confessional in a way I rarely heard from her at home. She was talking about someone named Derek, and the way she said his name made the hair on my arms stand up. And honestly, the physical part is just incredible. He makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. Blake is so predictable, safe. But Derek? She laughed softly. Derek is an adventure. I sat very still. Dr. Green's voice came through next, professionally neutral. How long has this been going on, Victoria? 14 months, since the Apex conference in Chicago. 14 months. I did the math automatically, my brain defaulting to the analytical patterns that had served me so well in my career. January of last year. We'd celebrated our 6th anniversary 2 weeks before that conference. I'd bought her diamond earrings. She'd cried and told me I was the best husband she could have asked for. I kept listening. Tell me about that first time, Dr. Green said. How did it begin? We were at the hotel bar after the keynote. I was exhausted from schmoozing all day, and he sat down next to me. He's the owner of Lawson Creative, a competitor technically, but we'd never met in person. We started talking shop, then moved on to other things. By midnight, we were in his room. And how did you feel afterward? Victoria's voice was contemplative. Guilty, at first, for about a week. But then, I don't know, it was like a door had opened. I texted him when I got back home just to see. And he texted back. And then we started meeting. Thursdays work best because I'm already out for therapy, so Blake never questions it. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not rage, that would come later. Something more like recognition. The puzzle pieces of the past year were rearranging themselves, clicking into place with sickening precision. Does your husband suspect anything? Dr. Green asked. Victoria's laugh was genuine and unguarded. Blake? No, he's too focused on his spreadsheets to notice anything. Honestly, he's too dumb to figure it out. He thinks I'm working on my anxiety. Too dumb to figure it out. I paused the recording and stared at the wall for a long time. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily. The same antique clock Victoria had insisted we buy at that estate sale in Alexandria. The one she'd said reminded her of her grandmother's house. I replayed those words in my head. Too dumb. She'd said it casually, like she was describing the weather. Not cruel exactly, just dismissive. Like I was a minor inconvenience she'd learned to work around. I thought about the past 14 months. The late nights she'd attributed to work deadlines. The conference calls that had to happen on Saturdays. The way she'd started going to the gym more often. Endorphins help with anxiety, Blake. And coming home freshly showered. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. I'm not a man given to dramatic outbursts. 20 years of wrestling, from middle school through college, had trained me to channel emotion into strategy. You don't win matches by being angry. You win by being patient, by reading your opponent, by waiting for the moment their guard drops. I pressed play again. Over the next 2 hours, I worked through recordings spanning 3 months. Victoria described the affair with clinical precision. Hotel rooms booked under Derek's corporate account. Lunch meetings that turned into afternoon sessions at his condo. A weekend in Napa, she'd told me, was a mandatory work retreat. She talked about the coordination required, the lies she'd constructed, the thrill of maintaining 2 separate lives. I got Blake the best anniversary present last month, she said in one recording. He has no idea I spent 3 days in wine country with another man 2 weeks before. I actually used some of the photos Derek took of me, scenic shots, nothing incriminating, and told Blake my coworker Megan took them. In another. The bracelet Derek gave me for Christmas? I told Blake I bought it for myself. A self-care purchase. He actually complimented me on it. Told me I deserved to treat myself. I remembered that conversation. I remembered being proud of her for investing in herself. I don't want to leave Blake, she said in a recording from mid-February. He's stable. He's safe. He's the life I show people. Derek is the life I actually live. I saved that clip separately. I copied every single audio file to a secure cloud drive I maintained for sensitive work documents. Then I cleared my activity from the iPad's history, wiped the smudges from the screen, and returned it to the exact position on the counter where I'd found it. When Victoria came home at 10:30, I was reading on the couch. Same book I'd been reading before. Same position. My hands were steady. My voice was even. Hey, babe. She dropped her purse on the entry table and kicked off her heels. Sorry I'm late. Session ran over and then I grabbed coffee with April. I looked up and smiled. How was it? Really good, actually. She walked over and kissed my forehead. Her perfume was the same as always, something floral and expensive that I'd bought her for her birthday. I'm making real progress. Dr. Green thinks I'm finally starting to understand my patterns. That's great, Tori. I'm proud of you. She squeezed my shoulder and headed upstairs to shower. I heard the water running, heard her humming something melodic, and I sat very still in the living room of the house I'd bought for us. I slept beside her that night. Or rather, I lay beside her while she slept. Her breathing soft and even, one hand curled under her pillow, the way it had been every night for 7 years. I stared at the ceiling and thought about 14 months of lies. 14 months of performances. 14 months of looking me in the eye and telling me she loved me while another man's touch was still fresh on her skin. I thought about the weekend in Napa. I'd been worried about her going alone, concerned about her anxiety in unfamiliar settings. She'd assured me she'd be fine, that she needed to push herself, that her therapist said it would be good for her. I thought about Derek Lawson, 41 years old according to what she'd said, owner of Lawson Creative, married with 3 children. I thought about Natalie Lawson, whoever she was, going about her life with no idea what her husband was doing every Thursday evening. And I started to plan. I called in sick on Friday, first time in 3 years. Victoria noticed but didn't question it. Poor baby, she kissed my forehead before leaving for work. Get some rest. I'll bring you soup for dinner. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I pulled out my laptop and began. I listened to every recording chronologically, taking detailed notes in a document I encrypted 3 ways. Names, dates, locations, patterns. This was how I handled security breaches at work. Systematic documentation, timeline reconstruction, vulnerability assessment. The emotional component was real, but I refused to let it drive my actions. The affair had started at the Apex conference in Chicago. Victoria had told me she'd be networking the whole trip, too busy to call much, but she'd text when she could. She'd texted me every night. Missing you, long day, love you. She'd been in Derek Lawson's hotel room when she sent those messages. I found patterns in the recordings. Thursdays were consistent. Victoria's therapy sessions ran from 5 to 6, leaving her free to meet Derek at his condo from 7 to 10 before heading home. But there were other meetings, too. Lunch dates on Tuesdays when she told me she was eating at her desk. Occasional Saturdays when she claimed to be shopping with April. April. I hadn't thought much about April Foster before. Victoria's college friend, someone she'd known since before we met. But in the recordings, Victoria mentioned her regularly. April's been covering for me. She's amazing. Blake called last Saturday to ask if I was still with her, and she didn't even hesitate. She just left. I'll tell her to call you. Total professional. April knew. April had been helping. Every time Victoria claimed to be grabbing drinks with April or shopping with April or having girl time with April, it had been a coordinated lie. I added April to my mental list. Saturday morning, I drove to a diner on the outskirts of the city, somewhere neither Victoria nor I had ever been, and met Grant Holloway in a back booth. Grant had been my best friend since our freshman year at Virginia Tech. We'd been roommates, wrestling teammates, each other's best man. He practiced civil litigation now, sharp and successful, the kind of attorney other attorneys warned their clients about. He was already at the booth when I arrived, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. "You look like garbage," he said by way of greeting. "Good to see you too." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" "Thursday night." I slid into the booth across from him. "Wednesday, technically. It's been a long couple of days." Grant's expression shifted from friendly concern to professional alertness. He'd known me too long to miss the signs. "What happened?" I pulled out my phone. "I'm going to play you something. About 3 minutes. Just listen." He put in his earbuds and hit play. I watched his face as Victoria's voice filled his ears. The casual confession, the dismissive laugh, Dr. Green's enabling questions. Grant's expression changed gradually, confusion giving way to recognition, then to something cold and hard settling behind his eyes. When the clip finished, he pulled out the earbuds slowly. "That's Tori. That's Tori. How long?" 14 months. I found recordings she made of her therapy sessions, hours of them. She's been having an affair with a guy named Derek Lawson, owns a competitor agency. He's married too. 3 kids. Grant's jaw tightened. I could see him processing, switching from friend mode to attorney mode. Years of courtroom experience were clicking into place. "Where did you find these recordings?" "On her iPad. The one we share. It was sitting on the kitchen counter." "Does she know you have them?" "No. I copied everything to a secure drive. She has no idea I know anything." "That's good. That's smart." He leaned back. "Does she know you called me?" I told her I was meeting an old work contact about a consulting opportunity. Grant nodded slowly, then pulled out a small notepad, an old habit from law school that he'd never dropped. "Okay, here's what we're looking at. Virginia is an equitable distribution state, not community property. You know what that means?" "Roughly. Assets get divided fairly, not necessarily equally." "Right. The court looks at various factors: length of marriage, contributions of each spouse, both monetary and non-monetary, circumstances that led to the dissolution. Marital misconduct, adultery, can affect how that division plays out. It can also impact spousal support determinations." I nodded slowly. "What do I need to prove?" "Well, you've got the recordings, which are gold. Her own words, her own admission. But you need corroboration, physical evidence that what she's describing actually happened." Judges like documentation they can verify independently. Phone records I can get. I'm the primary account holder on our plan. That's good. Texts, call logs, anything showing regular communication with this Derek guy. What about his wife? What about her? Grant leaned forward. Natalie Lawson. She's an asset. She doesn't know about this yet, right? As far as I can tell, she has no idea. When she finds out, and she will find out, she becomes a witness. Her testimony, her evidence from their marriage, it all supports your case. And frankly, he tapped his pen against the notepad. She deserves to know what her husband's been doing. So I should tell her? Not yet, not directly. We time it. We orchestrate it. Everything happens at once so Victoria and Derek can't coordinate their stories. He wrote something down. I've got a name for a private investigator. Guy named Walter Briggs, retired police detective. I looked at the paper. How much? Reasonable. For what he does, very reasonable. Call him today. Get him started. I folded the paper and put it in my wallet. What about confronting her? Don't. Grant's voice was sharp. I know that's hard. I know everything in you probably wants to throw those recordings in her face and watch her squirm. But if you tip her off now, she'll start covering tracks. She'll delete evidence. She'll get her story straight with Derek and April and whoever else knows. She'll lawyer up and come at you prepared. So I just keep pretending. For now. You play the loving husband while Briggs does his work. You smile and kiss her goodnight while I talk to a forensic accountant about your finances. You build the case methodically, leaving nothing to chance. And then? Grant's smile was grim. Then you bring the hammer down so hard she never sees it coming. I sat with that for a moment. The Grant I'd known in college, the guy who'd helped me through my first breakup, who'd talked me down from bad decisions, who'd made a speech at my wedding about what a perfect match Victoria and I were, was telling me to systematically destroy my wife's life. But the Blake who'd listened to those recordings wasn't the same man who'd walked down that aisle. Let's do it, I said. Walter Briggs met me at a coffee shop the following Monday. He was exactly what Grant had described. A heavy-set man in his late 50s with kind eyes, a calm demeanor, and the patient attention of someone who'd spent decades listening to people's problems. Thank you for meeting me on short notice, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Grant said it was urgent. He's referred me good clients before. Briggs stirred sugar into his coffee, unhurried. His hands were steady, workmanlike. Why don't you tell me what's going on? I gave him the summary, the recordings, the affair, the timeline. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, his expression never changing. When I finished, he sat back and took a long sip of his coffee. 14 months is a long time, he said finally. Long enough for them to develop routines, patterns. That's good for us. Good how? People who've been getting away with something for over a year get comfortable. They stop checking their mirrors. They start assuming they've figured out the system. He set down his cup. That's when they're most vulnerable. She meets him every Thursday night, I said. After her therapy session. Sessions end at 6. She doesn't come home until 10 or later. That's a 4-hour window, plenty of time. He pulled out a small notebook. What's his address? Where does he live? I don't know exactly. She just says therapy and meeting April for coffee. I've never had a reason to question it. That's fine. That's what I do. Briggs smiled slightly, the first hint of expression he'd shown. I'll pick her up from her office this Wednesday, follow her to the therapy appointment, then shadow her afterward. If she's meeting this Derek, I'll find out where, how long she stays, and what the evidence looks like. What kind of evidence? Photographs mostly, timestamps, license plates, her entering and exiting the building. Depending on the layout, maybe more. He tapped his pen against the notebook. I've done this 100 times, Mr. Taylor. People think they're being careful, but nobody's careful enough when they think they're safe. He quoted me his rate, reasonable, as Grant had promised, and we shook hands. "One more thing," Briggs said as I stood to leave. "I've worked a lot of these cases. Infidelity, I mean. Some end with confrontation, some end in court, some end with both parties just walking away quietly. What's your point?" "My point is that I've seen men in your position make decisions they regret. Get violent. Get reckless. Do things that hurt their case because they can't control their emotions." He met my eyes steadily. "You don't seem like that type. But if you're planning something more than a divorce, I need to know now. I'm not going to hurt anyone." "Good. Then I'm not here to judge you. Whatever you're planning, whatever comes next, that's your business. I'm just here to get you the truth." "The truth," I said, "is what I'm paying you for." The next 3 weeks were an exercise in controlled performance. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner with Victoria across the same table where we'd celebrated anniversaries and birthdays. I watched television beside her on the couch while her phone buzzed with texts she claimed were from her mother. I slept in our bed and woke up to her cheerful, "Good morning, babe," and pretended that everything was normal. She had no idea I was documenting her destruction. Every few days I received updates from Briggs. Photographs, timestamps, location data. Thursday, March 21st. Victoria entered the lobby of a high-rise condo building downtown at 7:08 p.m. She exited at 9:42 p.m. Briggs captured her walking through the lobby in the dress I'd complimented that morning. Green silk, flattering cut, the one she'd told me she was wearing to impress a new client. "The condo belongs to a man named Derek Lawson," Briggs reported. "Separate from his family residence, he bought it 18 months ago, listed as a home office for tax purposes." I also began my own investigation. Our shared phone plan gave me access to call and text logs. I'd never thought to check them before because I'd trusted my wife. There were hundreds of contacts with an unknown number over the past year, clustered around Thursday evenings and random weekday afternoons when Victoria had claimed to be in meetings. I cross-referenced the number with Derek Lawson's business contact, publicly listed on his agency's website. Perfect match. Meanwhile, the forensic accountant Grant had recommended, Helen Tran, reviewed our financial records with surgical precision. "There's no major fraud here," she told me during our second meeting. "Your wife isn't stealing from you in any direct sense. She's using her own income." "But?" Helen turned her laptop toward me. "Credit card account, personal, in her name only. You're not listed anywhere." I stared at the statement. Charges at hotels. The Ritz-Carlton in San Francisco during the Napa weekend. The Peninsula Chicago during the Apex conference. Restaurants, jewelry stores. Total affair-related expenses over 14 months. Approximately $23,000. How is she paying for it? A secondary checking account, also in her name only. Funded by portions of her work bonuses that she apparently reported to you as being smaller than they actually were. I thought about Victoria's last bonus. She'd told me it was $8,000 and suggested we put it toward a vacation. That vacation had never materialized. Something always came up. According to Helen's documents, the actual bonus had been $14,000. "This isn't legally fraud," Helen clarified. "It's her income, her accounts. But it establishes a pattern of financial deception that will be very relevant in divorce proceedings." I thanked her and added the documents to my growing file. April 5th was our 8th wedding anniversary. Victoria had planned the evening weeks in advance. Dinner at the restaurant where I'd proposed. The same corner table, the same bottle of wine we'd shared that night. She was excited about it in a way that seemed almost genuine, and I found myself marveling at her capacity for compartmentalization. "This is our spot," she said as we settled into our seats. "Remember how nervous you were? You ordered the wrong entree because you were so focused on the ring in your pocket." "I remember." She gave me a card that morning before work. Inside, she'd written, 8 years with my best friend. Here's to 80 more. I love you forever. I'd read it twice, then put it in my desk drawer. That evening, over candlelight and a 3-course meal, Victoria reached across the table and took my hand. Her eyes were actually wet. I know I've been distant lately, she said softly. The anxiety, the therapy. It's been a lot. But I want you to know that I'm working on myself, for us, for our future. I studied her face. The same face I'd woken up next to for 7 years. The same eyes I'd looked into when we exchanged vows. The same mouth that had told Derek Lawson about her dumb husband, who would never figure out what she was doing. I'm so grateful for your patience, she continued. A lot of men would have, I don't know, given up on me. But you never did. I squeezed her hand gently. I know exactly who you are, Tori. And I'm grateful too. She smiled, interpreting my words exactly the way I'd intended her to. As affirmation, as forgiveness, as love. She had no idea that tomorrow morning I would set in motion the systematic unraveling of everything she'd built. I love you, she said. I know you do, I replied. That night, she was affectionate in a way she hadn't been in months, and I let her believe it meant something. I woke up on April 6th with a sense of crystalline clarity. By 8 o'clock, I had 4 identical manila envelopes spread across the desk in my home office. Each one contained the same materials: a USB drive with selected audio recordings, a printed transcript of key passages, time-stamped photographs from Briggs, and a cover letter explaining the contents without editorializing. The first envelope was addressed to Eleanor and Richard Price, Victoria's parents, at their golf club community in North Carolina. The second was for Donna and Michael Taylor, my parents, in Richmond. The third went to Grant for formal legal documentation. The fourth, and most important, was addressed to Natalie Lawson. I'd found her address through Derek's property records. She and the 3 children lived in a sprawling colonial in the suburbs, blissfully unaware of the downtown condo or the woman who visited it every Thursday. I mailed 3 of the envelopes Friday evening. By Saturday morning, they would arrive. The 4th, I would deliver myself. My mother knew something was wrong the moment she opened the door. Blake? She stepped aside to let me in. What happened? My father was in the kitchen, reading the paper with his coffee. Vietnam veteran, retired mechanic, the kind of man who believed in solving problems directly and permanently. He looked up when I walked in and set down his mug. Son, you look like hell. I need to tell you both something. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten thousands of meals, done homework, announced my engagement. And I need you to listen to about 5 minutes of audio before I explain. I played them a carefully selected clip. Victoria's voice, casual and dismissive. Blake? He's too dumb to figure it out. He thinks I'm working on my anxiety. Then Dr. Green asking about Derek, and Victoria describing the affair in terms that made my mother gasp. When it ended, my father's face had gone very still. How long? He asked. 14 months. I found out 3 weeks ago. I've been building a case. Building a case? I hired a private investigator, consulted an attorney, documented everything. I'm not walking into this blindly, Dad. I'm going in prepared. My mother was crying quietly, not from sadness but from fury. That woman sat in my living room at Christmas. She looked me in the eye and told me how happy she was. I know, Mom. She talked about having children, said you two were thinking about starting a family. I hadn't known that. The thought of it, Victoria planning our future family while sleeping with Derek, made something in my chest tighten. What do you need from us? My father's voice was controlled, the same tone he used when discussing his service, when the emotions ran too deep for normal speech. Nothing. I just wanted you to hear the truth before you heard whatever version she might try to spin. My father stood up and crossed the kitchen to where I sat. He put his hand on my shoulder, a rare gesture from a man who showed love through action rather than touch. She's not welcome in this family anymore. I know. And this Derek person? He'll get his. His wife received a package this morning, too. My father's jaw tightened, then relaxed. He nodded once. I hugged them both, stayed for coffee, and drove home. The explosion happened at the Lawson household around 2 in the afternoon. Natalie Lawson received her package while Derek was at what he'd told her was a client meeting. She opened the envelope expecting business correspondence. It was addressed formally, no return address, nothing alarming. She inserted the USB drive into her laptop. She pressed play. By 3 o'clock, Derek received a phone call. I need you to come home, now. He arrived 30 minutes later to find his wife alone in the kitchen. The children were at her mother's house, with a divorce attorney's business card placed deliberately on the table between them. I have recordings, Derek. Natalie's voice was steady. Photos. I know about Victoria Taylor. I know about the condo. I know about everything. Derek panicked. He called Victoria's phone repeatedly, 14 times according to phone records. But she was at a spa with April, her device turned off, enjoying a facial while her world prepared to collapse. By 6 o'clock, when Victoria finally checked her messages, she had 14 missed calls from Derek, 7 from her mother, 4 from her father, 3 texts from her sister saying simply, "Call mom now," and 1 voicemail from Derek, his voice cracking with fear. Tori, he knows. Your husband knows. He sent everything to my wife. Call me. Victoria came home like a woman fleeing a burning building. Her car screeched into the driveway. Her keys fumbled at the door. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she burst into the living room. I was sitting in my armchair reading. Same book. Same position. I'd been waiting for nearly an hour. Blake. She stopped just inside the doorway, mascara smeared, her carefully maintained composure shattered. Blake, I need to talk to you. Something happened. Please, let me explain. I closed my book and set it aside. Looked at her. My face felt like stone. There's nothing to explain, Victoria. No, please, just listen. I've been listening for 3 weeks. I've heard everything. I stood up slowly. I've seen everything. I've documented everything. And as of this morning, I've shared everything. Her face cycled through expressions so rapidly I could almost track them. Shock, then fear, then a calculating assessment of her options, then desperation. The same woman who'd smiled at me across the anniversary table last night was now trying to figure out which manipulation would work. Baby, please. She took a step toward me. I was confused. I was lost. That's why I was in therapy. I was trying to fix myself. You weren't fixing yourself. I held up my phone. You were confessing to a therapist who helped you feel better about lying to me. You called me dumb. You laughed about it. Would you like to hear yourself? I pressed play. Her own voice filled the room. He's too dumb to figure it out. Victoria made a sound, somewhere between a sob and a moan, and her legs seemed to give out. She sank onto the couch, hands over her face, shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Blake. Please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. Real counseling, together. I'll do anything. You had 14 months to do anything. You chose to spend those months in Derek Lawson's bed instead. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I've already filed for divorce, I continued. The papers will be served Monday. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight. Your parents' house, maybe. I paused. Though from what I understand, you might not be entirely welcome there at the moment. Blake, please. The guest room door locks from the inside. I'll be sleeping there tonight. When I wake up tomorrow morning, I expect you to be gone. Can't we just talk about this? Just sit down and talk about what, Victoria? How you spent a year and a half lying to my face? How you coordinated alibis with your best friend? How you used our anniversary dinner to tell me how much you loved me while you were still seeing him? I do love you. I know that sounds insane right now, but I do. I never stopped. Then you have a very strange way of showing it. Victoria stood up from the couch, her legs unsteady. It wasn't about love. It was about, I don't know, something was missing. Something in me was broken, and I thought, you thought what? That sleeping with Derek Lawson would fix it? That lying to everyone who trusted you would make you whole? I was going to end it. I was working up to it. Dr. Green and I were processing. Dr. Green was helping you feel better about cheating on your husband. That's not therapy. That's a confession booth with a degree on the wall. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing what was left of her makeup. Please, Blake, don't throw away 7 years. Don't throw away everything we built. I didn't throw it away. My voice was even, controlled. You did. Every single day for 14 months. You threw it away in hotel rooms, and in Derek's condo, and in your therapist's office when you laughed about how easy it was to fool me. I never wanted to hurt you. That's the worst part, Victoria. I actually believe that. You didn't want to hurt me. You just didn't care enough to stop. I walked past her toward the hallway. She grabbed my arm. Blake, wait, please. Just give me a chance to explain. Let me tell you everything, the whole truth. Maybe if you understood. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up at her face. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago. The woman who'd laughed at my bad jokes, who'd held my hand at my grandmother's funeral, who'd said yes when I got down on one knee at our corner table. That woman was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed. There's nothing to understand, I said quietly. You made your choices. Now you live with the consequences. I walked past her without touching her, without looking back. Behind me, I could hear her crying, deep, ugly sobs, the kind that come from somewhere primal. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired, mostly, and sad for the man I'd been 3 weeks ago who still believed in his marriage. But I also felt something else, something harder and cleaner, the certainty that I was doing the right thing. The next few weeks were controlled chaos. Derek Lawson's carefully compartmentalized life detonated spectacularly. Natalie filed for divorce, demanding full custody and maximum support. His business partner learned about the affair. The advertising world is small and gossip travels fast, and immediately began distancing himself. 2 major clients, including one who'd worked with me professionally and learned the situation through the industry grapevine, quietly took their accounts elsewhere. His condo lease became public in the divorce filings. His family had no idea he'd been maintaining a secret apartment for over a year. Victoria hired an expensive attorney, Mitchell Stone, paid for by her humiliated parents, who were mortified by her behavior, but still, ultimately, her parents. Stone's strategy was predictable. Paint Victoria as a woman in emotional crisis, suggest that Blake's invasion of privacy by accessing her recordings should invalidate the evidence, push for standard asset division and temporary spousal support. Grant dismantled each argument systematically. The recordings had been stored on a shared family device, with no password protection beyond the basic unlock code that I'd known for years. There was no reasonable expectation of privacy. The adultery was documented and undeniable, not just through the recordings, but through Briggs's photographs, the phone records, the financial trail Helen Tran had assembled. And in Virginia, adultery affected spousal support determinations. Given Victoria's documented income and conduct, the argument for her receiving any support was weak at best. The key hearing came in mid-May. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for theatrics, reviewed our evidence package in chambers while both legal teams waited. She returned looking notably less sympathetic to Victoria than she had at the start. "The recordings are admissible," she announced. "The documentation is thorough. We'll proceed with discovery." Grant had one more card to play. "Your Honor, we'd like to subpoena Derek Lawson for a deposition regarding the timeline and nature of the affair." Mitchell Stone objected, calling it irrelevant harassment. The judge overruled him. Derek Lawson's deposition was, according to Grant, one of the most uncomfortable hours of his legal career. We met at Grant's office afterward, and he walked me through the highlights. Derek had arrived in a rumpled suit, visibly thinner than his LinkedIn photo, with the haunted look of a man whose life had imploded in every direction at once. "He tried to be evasive at first," Grant said, pouring us both coffee. "Lot of, 'I don't recall,' and 'I'd have to check my records.' But once I started playing the audio clips, he crumbled." "What did he say about Victoria?" "Everything you'd expect and some things you wouldn't." Grant flipped open his notes. He admitted the affair began 14 months ago. They met approximately 100 times, his estimate, which tracks with the phone records. Victoria initiated several of the encounters. She initiated. According to him, yes. He described her as, let me find the exact quote. Grant ran his finger down the page. Persistent. She made it clear what she wanted. His words. I thought about Victoria's version, the one she'd told Dr. Green, how Derek had pursued her, how she'd been swept away, how it had just happened. Another lie, apparently. Another convenient rewriting of history. What about his wife? Did he know we'd contacted Natalie? He figured it out pretty quickly, said he was devastated by how his family learned the truth. I asked him if he was devastated by the affair itself or just by getting caught. Grant smiled grimly. He didn't have a good answer for that. And the deposition transcript. You're sending it to Victoria's employer? Already done. Their audit team will have it by end of business today. Victoria's firm had been conducting an internal review since word of the scandal reached her boss, Gerald Ashby. I'd never met Gerald personally, but I knew him by reputation. Old-school advertising man, built his agency from nothing, valued discretion and professionalism above all else. The discovery that one of his senior marketing directors had been sleeping with a competitor's owner for over a year was not sitting well. They found no confirmed breach of confidentiality, Grant reported a few weeks later. There's no evidence Victoria shared client information with Derek. But she used company resources, calendar, email, to coordinate the affair. Her client meetings that were actually hotel visits violated company time policies. And regardless of what actually happened, her relationship with Derek creates an appearance of impropriety that they can't ignore. Victoria was called into Gerald's office on a Tuesday morning in early June. I wasn't there, obviously, but I learned later how it went. Gerald sat behind his desk, his face carefully neutral. Victoria's direct supervisor was present, along with a representative from HR. We've completed our review, Gerald said. I'm going to give you a choice, Victoria. You can resign quietly, effective immediately. We'll handle this professionally. No public statements, no detailed explanation. You can tell people you left for personal reasons. And if I don't, then I terminate you for cause. We document everything. The policy violations, the conflict of interest, the time theft, and you explain the gaps in your resume yourself. Victoria resigned that afternoon. No severance, no positive reference. Her career in advertising, at least in this city, was finished. The industry is small. Gossip travels fast. By the end of the week, everyone who mattered knew why she'd left. I also filed a complaint with the Virginia Board of Psychology against Dr. Pamela Green. This wasn't revenge, or not entirely. A few weeks after the divorce was filed, I'd consulted with a psychologist I knew socially, a man named Dr. Robert Finley, who'd treated some of my colleagues after difficult experiences. I'm not asking for therapy, I told him over coffee. I'm asking for an opinion, off the record. About what? I played him a few selected clips from the recordings. Victoria describing the affair, Dr. Green's responses, the overall pattern of their interactions. When I finished, Dr. Finley sat quietly for a long moment. I can't comment on a colleague's work without full context, he said carefully. But I can tell you what strikes me as unusual about what I just heard. Go on. A therapist's job isn't to pass judgment. We meet clients where they are, help them understand their patterns, guide them toward healthier choices. But there's a difference between maintaining neutrality and actively enabling harmful behavior. Meaning? Meaning that over 3 months of recordings, I heard Dr. Green validate your wife's affair repeatedly. She never once encouraged Victoria to consider the ethical implications of her actions. She never suggested couples therapy. She never recommended honesty or disclosure. She essentially provided a consequence-free space for Victoria to process her deception while continuing it. He shook his head. That's not therapy. That's confession with a degree on the wall. Is that grounds for a complaint? It might be. The licensing board takes ethical concerns seriously, especially around harm to third parties. You weren't Dr. Green's patient, but you were being directly harmed by her client's behavior she was aware of and never challenged. I filed the complaint 2 weeks later. The board opened an investigation. Dr. Green was informed she might face license review. I provided the recordings, the transcripts, and a detailed timeline of the affair and the corresponding therapy sessions. Her defense was presented at the preliminary hearing. I submitted a written statement rather than appearing in person. I didn't want to face her, didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing how much the recordings had affected me. Dr. Green's argument was simple. Therapy required meeting clients where they were. She wasn't obligated to advocate for any particular course of action. Her role was to help Victoria understand her feelings, not to impose moral judgments. The board's response was measured but pointed. While Dr. Green hadn't violated explicit statutes, her approach demonstrated concerning disengagement with the harm being perpetuated. A therapist had some responsibility to consider the broader impact of a client's behavior, especially when that behavior was ongoing and causing active damage to others. She received a formal reprimand and was required to complete additional ethics training, 40 hours of continuing education focused on therapeutic boundaries and third-party harm. It wasn't license revocation, but it was a permanent mark on her record. I heard through the grapevine that several of her long-term patients left her practice in the months that followed. She closed her private practice about 8 months later and took a position at a community mental health center in Alexandria. I didn't feel triumphant about that either. Just satisfied, I suppose, that there had been consequences for everyone involved. There was collateral damage I hadn't fully anticipated. April Foster, Victoria's best friend and alibi provider, was confronted by her own husband Kevin when the scope of her involvement became clear. Kevin was a decent guy. I'd always liked him. And discovering that his wife had spent a year helping Victoria deceive me was a betrayal he couldn't forgive. He filed for divorce 3 weeks after Victoria's. Kevin approached me once, outside a coffee shop, his face tight with anger. "You ruined my marriage too," he said. I looked at him for a long moment. "April ruined your marriage by lying for a year. I just told the truth." He stood there, fists clenched, searching for a response. Eventually, his shoulders dropped. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know." He called me 2 weeks later to apologize. I told him no apology was necessary. The mediation session in July was Victoria's last real attempt to negotiate. She'd spent the previous months watching her life disintegrate piece by piece. Unemployed. No one in the local advertising scene would touch her. Socially isolated, most of our mutual friends had quietly sided with me, and her own friends were dealing with their own fallout. Living in a rented apartment because her parents, humiliated beyond the limits of their family loyalty, had refused to let her move home. "We didn't raise you to behave this way," her mother had apparently said. "We love you, Victoria, but we can't enable you. You need to face the consequences of what you've done." Her expensive attorney was hemorrhaging her savings, and the divorce was heading toward an outcome she couldn't afford to fight. So she requested mediation, one final conversation before the decree was finalized. We gathered in a neutral conference room downtown. Me, Victoria, Grant, Mitchell Stone, and a court-appointed mediator named Patricia Delgado. The room was bland in the way professional spaces always are: beige walls, generic art, a conference table that had seen 1,000 difficult conversations. Victoria looked diminished in a way I'd never seen before. Her usual polish was stripped away. No expensive jewelry, no designer clothes, just a simple blouse and slacks. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something like pity. Then I remembered the recordings. The laughter, the dismissiveness, and the pity evaporated. "Blake." Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. "I know I can never undo what I did. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for reconciliation. What are you asking for?" "Mercy." She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. "I've lost everything, Blake. My job, my friends. My family won't speak to me. I'm living in a studio apartment in Fairfax, working as a temp at a real estate office because no one in advertising will hire me. And whose fault is that?" "Mine. I know it's mine." A tear slipped down her cheek. "But we were married for 7 years. Doesn't that count for anything? Doesn't any of what we had matter?" I studied her face, looking for the woman I'd married. Traces of her were still there. The shape of her jaw, the color of her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she was being sincere. But something fundamental had changed in my perception. I could no longer see her without also seeing the recordings, the lies, the 14 months of casual betrayal. "You had me," I said. "You had our life. You had everything. And every single day for 14 months, you chose to destroy it. You laughed about how easy it was. You called me dumb. You made our marriage a joke to your therapist." "I know. No, Victoria. I don't think you do." I leaned forward. "You didn't feel guilty. You felt clever. You felt powerful. You felt like you'd found a cheat code for life. A stable husband and an exciting affair, and nobody would ever have to know. I was going to end it. When? After 20 months? After 3 years? Or were you just going to keep going until you got caught? Because you never seemed particularly interested in stopping," Victoria's attorney interjected. "Mr. Taylor, this isn't productive. We're here to discuss settlement terms, not relitigate the circumstances of the divorce." Grant's voice was calm. "My client has a right to express his position." "I'm not interested in punishment," I said, looking at Victoria. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to move on with my life, and that means ending this chapter clearly and completely." "Then what do you want?" "Exactly what we've proposed. The house, my retirement accounts, half the joint savings, no spousal support." "Blake, I can't survive on that. The credit card debt alone. The credit card you used to finance your affair? The secret account you hid from me for over a year?" I shook my head. "That's your debt, Victoria. You incurred it. You lied about it. You get to pay it. I'm asking you to be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. If I wanted to be vindictive, I'd push for you to cover my legal fees. I'd drag this out for months. I'd make sure every person in your industry knew every detail of what you did." I held her gaze. "I'm not doing that. I'm giving you a clean break. Take it." Silence filled the room. Patricia Delgado, the mediator, cleared her throat. "I think we should take a short recess. Give everyone time to consider." "No need." Victoria's voice was flat. I'll sign. Mitchell Stone looked surprised. Victoria, we should discuss. There's nothing to discuss. She pulled the settlement papers toward her. He's right. This is my consequence. I'll live with it. She signed without reading further. Grant witnessed. I signed. Patricia notarized. Our divorce was finalized on August 1st. A year passed. The first few months were harder than I'd expected. Not because I missed Victoria, or rather, not because I missed the woman she'd actually been. I missed the woman I thought I'd married. The woman who'd existed in my imagination for 7 years. The one who'd loved me completely and faithfully. That woman had never been real. Accepting that took time. I renovated the master bedroom first. Couldn't sleep there anymore, not with the memories it held. I hired a contractor, stripped it to the studs, rebuilt it as a home office. New walls, new floor, new everything. By the time it was finished, you'd never know the old room had existed. The therapist, a sharp woman named Dr. Kessler, nothing like Dr. Green, helped me process what she called the grief of betrayal. You're not just mourning the end of your marriage, she explained during one of our sessions. You're mourning the loss of your reality. Everything you believed about your life for 14 months was false. That's a profound psychological trauma, even if no one hit you. I don't feel traumatized. I feel angry, mostly, and tired. Anger is part of grief. So is exhaustion. She wrote something in her notebook. You've spent the past several months operating in crisis mode, investigating, documenting, planning, executing. Now the crisis is over, and your body doesn't know what to do with itself. She was right. The weeks after the divorce was finalized felt strange and empty. No more strategy sessions with Grant. No more updates from Briggs. No more paperwork to sign or hearings to attend. Just life. Ordinary life, without the structure of revenge to hold it together. I threw myself into work. The promotion came in October. Senior Director of IT Security, a title I'd been working toward for years. My boss, a pragmatic woman named Sandra Malone, called me into her office to deliver the news. You've earned this, she said. Your performance this past year has been exceptional. Whatever was going on in your personal life, you didn't let it affect your work. Thank you. That means a lot. I know about the divorce. She said it matter-of-factly. Small company. People talk. I just wanted you to know that I respect how you handled it. A lot of people would have fallen apart. Falling apart wasn't an option. No, she agreed. For people like us, it never is. I reconnected with old friends who drifted during my marriage, college buddies, former colleagues, people I'd unconsciously deprioritized as Victoria's social calendar consumed our shared life. Grant and I started having dinner once a month, sometimes with other friends, sometimes just the two of us. You seem lighter, he said one evening, over steaks and bourbon. Like you finally put down something heavy. I did, about 140 pounds of dead weight. He laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd gotten out of him in months. That's cold, man. It's accurate. I started dating cautiously after the new year. Nothing serious at first. Coffee dates, dinners, concerts with interesting women who knew my story and didn't treat me like damaged goods. Some of them had been through divorces themselves. We compared war stories, laughed at the absurdity of it all, moved on. Emma Sinclair was different from the start. We met at a fundraiser for veterans charities. She'd been invited by a colleague, I'd been dragged along by Grant, and ended up talking for 3 hours about everything from civil engineering to college wrestling to the proper way to make a Manhattan. You seem remarkably well-adjusted for a divorced guy, she said at some point. I had a good therapist, and a good lawyer. In that order? Lawyer first, actually. The therapist came later. She laughed. That's an honest answer. I try to be honest. It's become kind of a thing for me. We exchanged numbers. A week later, we had dinner. 3 months later, we were exclusive. 8 months in, I was starting to think about words like future and permanent in ways I'd been afraid to consider before. Victoria moved back to North Carolina after the divorce. She took a lower-level marketing position at a small firm. Significant pay cut, limited advancement potential. Her reputation had preceded her. The advertising world is small, and gossip travels between cities. She started seeing a new therapist, one who actually challenged her patterns instead of enabling them. I learned this secondhand, through mutual acquaintances, and felt nothing in particular about it. Good for her, I supposed. Everyone deserves a chance to do better. She sent me an email about 6 months after the divorce. Long, careful, clearly edited multiple times. She talked about understanding, about growth, about wanting me to know she was working on being a better person. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she wrote. "I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. Not just the actions, but the damage. I broke something irreplaceable, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life." I read it once. Thought about responding. Decided there was nothing to say that hadn't already been said. I blocked her email address and went back to my day. Derek Lawson's downfall was complete by the time our divorce was finalized. Natalie got the house, primary custody of the children, and a substantial support arrangement that would keep Derek writing checks for the next 15 years. His business never recovered. His partner bought him out completely, rebranded the agency, and pretended Derek had never existed. Last I heard through the industry grapevine, he was doing freelance consulting, living in a cramped downtown apartment, dating a woman 15 years younger than him who probably had no idea about his history. Some people learn from their mistakes. Others just find new venues for the same performances. April Foster's marriage didn't survive either. Kevin filed for divorce 3 weeks after ours was finalized, citing irreconcilable differences in the paperwork, but making it clear to anyone who asked that his wife's year of lies had been the breaking point. He called me once about a month after his decree came through. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for what I said outside that coffee shop, blaming you for my marriage ending. That was wrong. Forget it. No, I mean it. April made her choices. You just showed me what those choices were." He paused. "I should be thanking you, honestly. Better to know the truth than live in a lie." That's what I told myself, too. 2 years after I discovered those recordings, I attended a charity gala downtown. I'd been dating Emma Sinclair for about 8 months by then, a civil engineer with a dry sense of humor and a directness I'd come to treasure. We were at the bar when I saw a familiar face across the room. Victoria was there with her employer's delegation. She was thinner than I remembered, her hair different, her demeanor more subdued. Our eyes met. She looked like she wanted to approach. I could see her weighing it. 2 years ago, I might have wanted to see her grovel, to hear her apologize one more time. But I wasn't the man I'd been 2 years ago. I held her gaze for 3 seconds. Long enough to acknowledge that I'd seen her. Long enough for her to see that I wasn't afraid or angry or even particularly interested. Then I turned back to Emma, put my hand on the small of her back, and guided her toward a table across the room. "Everything okay?" Emma asked. "Yeah," I said. "Everything's fine." I didn't look back. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for karma. They pray and wish and hope the universe will balance its scales. Me? I decided to deliver it myself. And I made sure it was a package Victoria Taylor would never forget.